Hi there, and welcome to another edition of Cool People. Now, over the last couple of years, since starting my gender transition, I've met all sorts of cool people because I've been on the diversity and inclusion circuit, doing public speaking and trans awareness training, and also my media appearances. And these cool people have got all sorts of amazing stories to tell, and I've just become friends with them. So the whole idea of this project is to share my friends with you. So one of my friends today is a very cool person by the name of Essie Hardy. And she's a disability and inclusion expert, event speaker, and a podcaster. So welcome, Essie.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much for agreeing to take part in this project. So I'm absolutely loving doing this project. It's brilliant because it's just a great chance to catch up with my friends and just help share stories. So yeah. I just wonder, would you like to share your story, please?
Sure. So I won't tell you my age. Actually, I'm quite old. But I'm not 21 anymore. I'm not 21. I'm 25.
Yeah, and I'm 22. Yeah, right.
After all, you look at Katie. You do look at. So yeah, I'm Essie Hardy, and I have cerebral palsy, which is a physical impairment. Which for me, well, it's a type of brain damage, and for me, it affects all four of my limbs. So I've got quadriplegia, so all four of my limbs are affected, meaning I can do everything a little bit, but nothing to the full extent. I wasn't born disabled. I became disabled when I was 4 months old after contracting a virus. And I was on life support for a while, and I had to have some oxygen drained off my brain, which left me with brain damage and cerebral palsy. And so I grew up in Germany, and as my mum tells the story, she took me out of Germany when I was 3 because they wanted to put me in a kindergarten that was for children with learning disabilities. And in Germany at that time, they weren't forward thinking enough to be able to think, oh, okay, disabilities and impairments are very different. So we should look at the children as an individual. They wanted me to go with, what they thought a disability was. So my mum wanted me to have a few more opportunities. So we went to Scotland, and I grew up in Scotland from the age of 3 till I was 9 in different areas of Scotland, with, close to my grandparents and my cousins. I had quite a good upbringing, actually. The schools I went to were mainstream schools, and it was important for my mum that I went to mainstream schools so that I learned that I didn't have any limitations really in what I might want to do when I was older due to my disability. But obviously that caused some issues, especially still in the 80s, the mid-80s by this time. So you're kind of getting to know how old I am. The mid-80s by this time, they still weren't really that up on what inclusion was and what disabled or even accessibility was, to be honest. So I used to have classroom assistants that would come to school with me to help me do the things I wanted to do. But I was in one school where they hadn't organised a classroom assistant in time because the local authority didn't want to pay for one. So my mum had to come and be my classroom assistant for about 4 months. Which is fine for a 7-year-old because, a 7-year-old doesn't really know any different, and it was cool to have my mum in school and be able to call her Mrs. Mum.
Mrs. Mum, I love that.
And Mrs. Mum, and my friends all thought she was cool and everything. Yeah. And I used to play in the playground with my friends, and we used to play all the games that kids played, like Kiss, Cuddle and Torture. Or maybe not all the games, but Stuck in the Mud and all of those things. But the really cool thing is my friends learned really quickly that I wasn't able to keep up with them when they ran. So they would walk so that I had a chance of winning sometimes. Aww. So the whole game would be in walk mode rather than running mode. So my friends were really kind of inclusive with me at the time as 8-year-olds. Yeah. It was really lovely, actually. Yeah. And then we moved again to England. And I was put back in quotes in a special school, because the local authority told my mum and stepdad at the time that actually that was the best opportunity for me. It became very, very apparent very quickly to my parents that that wasn't a place where I was going to thrive, because again they looked at children as what they couldn't do rather than what they could do. And so they sacrificed the education for teaching us to put our own clothes on and our own shoes on and everything. And I remember, I'm physically disabled. I'm quite profoundly physically disabled in my arms. And I remember one time asking for a teacher to help me to blow my nose. And she said, well, you're 9 years old. You should be able to do it yourself. You're not a baby. So not only was the education missing, but they actually missed out on the fundamentals of impairments and actually teaching children to have self-esteem. And so I was taken out of that school and spent my last year of primary school in another mainstream school local to where I live. And then when I was 12 or 11, I went to secondary school, and I went to another, in quotes, special school, which again concentrated more on what I couldn't do and trying to fix me, in quotes, than it did on the education. So I was telling somebody the other day, actually, in my first year of secondary school, I was in a group called Flame, and Flame is it comes from Hungary, and it is a theory of teaching children with cerebral palsy to be able to do things for themselves. So it's all based around kind of repetitive learning and those kind of things. So we were given a bench that was tailored to our height. We had to sit on the bench, and we had to repeat, my feet are flat on the floor, flat, flat, flat. My arms are flat on my knees, 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 knees. And it went on like this for, 45 minutes every single day. And we had to sit in the main hall and do it. And so the school I went to was a boarding school. So it was the main hall of the house that I was in. And so all the other kids would be going to their classes, taking the mickey out of us, because, as kids do, which was really humiliating. But also at the same time, because we were in Flame, again, we were missing out on the education. They were sacrificing our education for our physical education. And I have to say, as a result of Flame, I don't think anything much has improved.
No.
Apart from the fact that I hate wooden benches, and I never want to see another one in my life. So, Trelaw, the school I went to was Lord Mayor Trelaw School at the time. It was very good. And it was very good at supporting disabled students, especially in the 90s, weren't really included anywhere else. So in the mainstream schools that my mum was looking at the time to send me to instead, they had special departments where all the, in quotes, the special kids, all the disabled kids would go, and then we'd have our own lunches, our own playtimes, and all that stuff, but none of the education. So when the children, and at the time it wasn't inclusion, is integration or not integration. So when the children deigned to integrate with mainstream kids, they were bullied, because the mainstream kids, first of all, weren't used to seeing disabled children, and also were told through what they saw that disabled children are different, and perhaps not as good, or perhaps scary. And so there was a lot of bullying that went on in the schools that my mum kind of saw when it was time for me to go to secondary. So for all those reasons, she pushed for me to go to Trelaw's. And I had good times in Trelaw's. Obviously all the school trips were adapted and inclusive of disabled people, and we did all the school trips. So we went to Paris, we went to can't remember where else we went to, but we went to lots of places. We went on like farming holidays where we were meant to abseil down. If you can imagine a bunch of disabled children abseiling down a wall, it's quite scary when you think about it. So good stuff as well. And I met some really good people there as well. But when I was 16, I thought, I don't want to be in a specialist system anymore, because what I was noticing was that a lot of my mainstream non-disabled friends were way ahead of me when it came to education. Although I did do GCSEs and all the exams, they were still way ahead of me. And I also noticed that I wasn't socialising as much as my other non-disabled friends were doing. Partly because all my friends at the time, or most of my friends at the time, were at boarding school, so I only saw them when I was at school. And also partly because it was quite a small, close-knit world where I went to school. So when I came out, I wasn't joining in the youth groups. I wasn't going out where all the non-disabled children were going out and being with friends at weekends. So I really wanted to be an environment where I was, in quote, normal, and where I could have the, in quote, normal life that I thought I would be leading as a 16-year-old. So I went to my local college. And whilst I really, really enjoyed my local college and I wanted to study drama there, I suffered a lot of discrimination while I was at college from the faculty, who, again, didn't understand what disability was and actually what it meant to be inclusive. I mean, at the time it was 1998, and we were still, I think we were still kind of looking more at integrating those disabled kids with the non-disabled kids, or the normal kids, which was the term at the time, than including people.
I like the word.
So sorry.
No, you're right.
So as long as the kids were in the same room, then that was integration. But never mind the fact that I couldn't participate because the activities weren't made accessible to me. I also wanted to do drama, and the faculty in the drama department felt in the first year that I couldn't possibly, so they made every excuse under the sun not to, meaning that I couldn't do the drama course that I wanted to do. So I did a business studies course for the first year. And then in the second year, I went into the drama department and did drama. But again, it wasn't accessible and it wasn't inclusive to me. I had staff that would come out of the learning support department to me to support me in my classes. And as I said before, because of what they'd seen, the students were taught that disabled people are different. And that actually they can't socialise with us, so I found it very difficult to make friends. The staff that came from the learning department were lovely people, but they were older people, so kind of the age I am now, but when you're a 16-year-old girl, that's ancient. So nobody wanted to hang around with me when the staff were around. I didn't want to go into the department with the learning support department because of the stigma that was attached to that. So I would make the staff come out and help me in a loo that wasn't in the learning support department. But the only toilets, the toilets that were in the learning support department were the only toilets that were accessible toilets. So I would sacrifice my own need for an image. And so I really struggled in that way to actually physically go to the loo because I wasn't able to fit in the cubicles, but I still preferred that over having that stigma attached to me of being in that department.
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, at the same time, we have to remember that I'm kind of between 16 and 18 years old. All I want to do is fit in. I'm not a disability inclusion specialist. I'm an 18-year-old girl that cares about Robbie Williams and takes that, and nice jeans. I don't care about actually teaching anyone or making people aware or being a representative of disability or anything like that.
No.
There would be occasions where I would want to join. There was a specific occasion actually where I wanted to do, it was a 24-hour sit-in, I think it was. And what it was all these students signed up to do this sit-in. And what we do is, the plan was in the evening, the whole night, we would create a piece of theatre. So a devised piece of drama, and then the next day we were performing, and it was a whole 24-hour thing. And so I'd signed up probably a good 2 months before the thing happened, and I turned up on the evening to go, and the tutors essentially told me that I was a health risk and a fire risk because what would possibly happen in the event of a fire. and that they hadn't got my mum's signature to say I could go. So anyway, I had to go home. My mum was furious, not with me, but with them. And she stormed into the college on the Monday, which again was very embarrassing. So I'd only tell her like a third of what was happening, because I didn't want her storming in the college, because that again didn't help my image. And when again you're 18, reputation is everything, everybody's watching everything. So everybody would know when my mum was in the building, because she was quite a formidable woman. And so I would limit what I would tell her for my image purpose. So she stormed into the college and, you know, obviously said, my daughter has once again been discriminated against. You had no right to do that. You had lots of warning, but it fell on deaf ears. And because neither of us were kind of experts in the field of awareness and inclusion and equality, kind of that was that really. The college told me that I would never go to university. I ended up going to drama school. To Liverpool Institution of Performing Arts in Liverpool, funnily enough, where I studied acting, and then I went on to work in LA for a while as an actress, which was amazing. I did think every day I was going to bump into Robbie Williams, but it never happened. You know, I think quite a few times I crashed with my wheelchair into poles because I was too busy looking around thinking, where is Robbie? Where? He must be around here somewhere. Getting very lost. But it was an amazing experience. It was an absolutely incredible experience. I didn't make it to my Beverly Hills mansion next to Robbie Williams. So I came home and I worked as an actress probably for about 3 or 4 years. And I slowly started drifting into kind of workshop leading. A friend who I knew, an actress friend, told me that they were doing kind of a week's course for workshop leaders, and would I want to come? She'd given me a place. So I went along and did that. And realised I actually enjoyed telling children what to do. So I did that for a while. That was really fun, actually. One of my, when I worked for a theatre company, one of the theatre companies I worked for, I ran a group called Dramability. I didn't name the group, I was past the group. It was past me. So it was not my choice of a name. And that was, again, in quotes, integrated, moving more into inclusion, but still integration, integrated group of kids with disabilities and non-disabled children. And we would put on pieces of theatre that they would devise, obviously with my support. And there was one stage where all of the students in the group were disabled students, and they decided to put on a performance about how they felt about being a disabled person in the early 2000s. And I thought, this is really, really interesting. This didn't come from me. This wasn't something that I was pushing for them. But actually what they've created is really meaningful. And actually there's a lot in here that I think people could learn from. So I started moving more into kind of the work around kind of telling a story, giving a message about disability inclusion, disability awareness at the time. And then I think I was in a beauty salon, actually, and I was about to go in for an appointment, and I got a phone call, and this person said, hello, is this Essie? And I was like, speaking. And he said, hello, my name's Ed. I work for Hampshire County Council, and I, along with a colleague of mine, we're putting together a board of disabled people and carers that will strategically work with adult services to improve the lives of disabled people in Hampshire. Would you like to join the group? And I don't remember saying this, but apparently I said, well, it's about time. And so I joined the group, which is called the Personalisation Expert Panel, and I still sit and co-chair that panel today, actually. So through that panel, I got to learn a lot more about kind of the social model of disability and the disability movement, and why disabled people, so the kind of the history of disability and the journey to where we are today, and why disabled people are in this situation now, and what we can together proactively do to kind of change our outcomes. And I was asked to deliver some training as well. So I worked as a trainer for them as well. And I delivered training to social workers about how they can support disabled people. And then what happened after that? And then I did that for a long time while still delivering drama workshops. And I applied for this role with a charity in Hampshire to work in a care home. And on the application form, it said, you must have a degree or a diploma in health and social care up to level 2, or else you can't possibly do this role. And I am paraphrasing it quite in those words, but that was the meaning. And so I called them up and I said, well, I don't have any of those qualifications, but I don't think I need them. And they said, well, why don't you think you need them? So I explained all of my experience and that I am a disabled person myself, and that I've been a member of the personalisation expert panel, worked with disabled children, and my experiences have brought me to where I am today. And they said, well, we think you should apply anyway. So I applied and got an interview and was offered the job an hour later.
Wow.
So I worked for them for 2.5 years, first of all in their care homes, supporting disabled people to be able to make life choices for themselves, and to understand what a meaningful decision was, because a lot of the disabled people in the care homes, and this is kind of it goes across the board for disabled people who live in care, a lot of the time are quite institutionalized, and they used to be being told what to do and when to do it and how to do it. And a lot of disabled people in that situation go straight from live-in school care to live-in adult social care in care homes. And so a lot of my job was helping them to understand that they do have choices, and make it what a meaningful decision is and how to make that meaningful decision. Because also, if you've never experienced something, then you don't know what it's going to be like, and you can't possibly make a decision about what you want if you've never experienced what it's like for it to go wrong or for it to be good. So helping them to see the wider picture, and also training the staff to understand that and then to deliver that same service. And then I was promoted up to the head office, which was not very far away, it's all one campus, but promoted up to the head office, where I worked on personalisation and inclusion for the organisation. So I did that for about 18 months, and then I thought, well, it's really good actually doing it internally in a business where I'm supporting the business to be inclusive of disabled customers. And actually then supporting disabled customers themselves to have the confidence to go out and ask for what they want and apply for the jobs. But it stops there, because there's that glass ceiling, because then the organisations and the companies, they haven't had the same inclusive awareness, inclusive training. So it's time that somebody, i.e. me, maybe did something to help companies to make that leap and understand how capable disabled people are to begin with, and then understand those barriers to try to put in to mitigate the barriers that are happening and make it so the disabled people can be productive. And so that's when I left, and I set up Celebrating Disability. And I named it Celebrating Disability because I wanted something that was punchy. To be honest, I wanted something that would be searchable in the search engines, which is why I put disability in there. But I wanted, so many people feel that disability is a negative. And they, I see it in people's faces because I don't look disabled when I'm sitting on a non-wheelchair chair. Which I am just now, and then I stand up or move a bit, or I talk to somebody on the phone and I say, what sport do you have, because I am disabled, and they go, oh, sorry. And I say, well, there's nothing to be sorry about, just answer the question. Or there's nothing to be sorry about, let's just carry on before I mention that I'm disabled. It doesn't make a difference. And phrases like, what's wrong with you? Well, there's nothing wrong with me, but if you're talking about my disability, then that's a different question. Or just that apologetic tone all over disabled people or inspiring. It's fine to be inspiring if you're inspiring because of something you've achieved, not because you've woken up and able to spell your own name, which sometimes is what people mean. Or disabled people are brave. Well, it's great that I'm brave if, again, I've done something that's worthy of being brave, but not just because I've taken my wheelchair on the train and I'm now in London.
Yeah.
So I wanted to use the word celebrating because I wanted people to start thinking about disability as something different, thinking about disability as something that is to be celebrated for the different experiences that it's developed in somebody and the different opportunities that it gives to that person and to the business. I have had a lot of experiences. For example, LA, for example, when I was 12, I went to Florida and spent 10 days in Disney World and all of the centers around. I've been to South Africa, I've been to Zimbabwe, and whilst loads of other people who perhaps aren't disabled have done that as well, a lot of those experiences came because I am a disabled person, because they had holidays designed for disabled children to be able to do that, or because through personal assistance that have been international that I've met have been able to stay in places like Australia and Zimbabwe and South Africa, which I may be able to achieve otherwise, but my experience of it is different because I'm disabled. It's also made me a very strong and confident person, because as disabled people we have a lot of prejudicial challenges to face every day, and so for me to compensate for that, I developed a skin that was quite confident, outgoing. And that was something I was able to do. So I think there's a lot of things that we should celebrate when we think about disability and difference in general as well. But it's still in 2020 overlooked. And so I wanted, with my business and with the name of my business, to kind of challenge that and to present a different viewpoint.
Yeah, well, it's such a positive name. I think it's brilliant. I think celebrating disability, I think it's genius. I think
thank you.
No, I think it's great, and it really struck me because we both spoke at the same event in London last year, and it was brilliant hearing you speak then, and it's sort of saying how positively you were speaking about it. I think it's absolutely fantastic and absolutely the right thing to do, and. When you were the thing that struck me then was when you were saying you asked us all, if you're asking what disability you have, and you're asking a disabled person that, what would you say? And of course, typically a lot of people say, "What's wrong with you?" And that was the point that you got across very, very well. And this is, "There's nothing wrong with me. What's wrong with you?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What's your problem? And then you just turn it around on them, and when you say it, of course, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, but I think after that it goes beyond that, and why people are asking the question in the first place. Why do you need to know what my impairment is? I mean, I explained it here because it's relevant to the story I was telling. But when I walk into a building or wheel into a building, it doesn't matter what my impairment is. It matters what support I need.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I think we should be looking to change the question completely and changing the mindset from, what is your disability or what is your impairment, to how can I help you?
I think it's all about education, isn't it? I think it's when people don't know enough about something, then they like to sort of talk about whatever they know about it, and if it's disabilities, then they just think about what's wrong with you. They just look at that side of it, and same sort of thing with with trans people. When I come out to people as being trans, very often the first question they'll ask me very personal questions about surgery. And yet you would never ask a cisgender person about surgery.
Right.
You just wouldn't. But it's so common for that to be asked, and I don't think it comes from a place of malice at all. I just think it's ignorance, and that they don't know enough about it, and they think that that the whole journey is about Well, they don't think it's a journey. They think it's just about going for an operation and that's it.
Yeah.
And
I think it sounds like some people think that you might wake up one morning and think, oh, you know what, I fancy being Katie today. I think
yeah, why not?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's weird, and I completely agree. And I think with disability and with transgender, that there is so much stigma, and there has been a lifetime of stigma around. I mean, I was watching Mrs. Doubtfire the other day. I've downloaded Disney Plus, and I haven't watched Mrs. Doubtfire since I was about 14 years old. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is awful. You know, all the little innuendos and all the little like one-liners about being transgender. It's just horrible, really.
I know.
You know, I think that's the problem. I think, you know, the media, we as a society, we listen so much to what the media tells us because it's everywhere, and they're meant to be kind of the people that know what they're talking about. And we listen to what our, you know, our relatives and our parents and our families have told us, and we take that with us. We take that forward. So when it comes to disability and when it comes to gender, we're not thinking of the person as a person. We're thinking about how we can fix the problem.
Yep, absolutely.
And I think that's the issue, that people don't look at the history. They won't be looking at your history as to, you know, what happened up until this point, and they're not looking at my history and my experiences and what I am capable of. They're looking at what I can't do.
Do you know it's still legal in this country to have to put people through conversion therapy?
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's terrible, isn't it? I mean, generally,
disgusting.
I know it's terrible, absolutely terrible, and it doesn't work at all. It's incredibly damaging. It's incredibly damaging. It generally tends to be sort of extreme religious people that tend to sort of put, you know, instigate these things, but it's still legal. How can that be? It shouldn't.
That is absolutely disgusting.
I know, it shouldn't be.
I mean, I knew it was illegal in America, but I didn't realise it was, I mean, legal in America, but I didn't realise it was legal here. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Insane.
Yeah. And in terms of the sort of stigma and awareness and everything, where do you think we are in the UK now?
We have come a long way. I mean, if you look at where we were, you know, in the beginning of the 1900s, I mean, obviously we've come a long way since then, but we have so far to go. I mean, we have legislation, but legislation doesn't mean anything. I mean, you know, I'm sure you'll agree with me with gender. It doesn't mean anything. It's a piece of paper on a form. Legislation is always minimum standards. So people feel that if they meet that legislation, then they've done it. But actually, what really matters is people's attitude. It's not about, I mean, going back to what I was saying before about the difference between integration and inclusion, there's a massive difference between putting people in a room together and making sure that everybody can do what they want on their own terms, how they want and when they want. And that's what inclusion is. And we are an integrated society, but we're working towards an inclusive society. But I don't think, from a disability point of view, but also just from a human being point of view, we're not a completely integrated intersectional society that celebrates difference.
No.
And diversity, and that's where we need to be. I think going back to what you were saying about awareness and understanding, there's still a distinct lack of understanding. You know, when we're talking in terms of disability, but or diversity, there's a distinct lack of the barriers. First of all, there's a distinct lack of what a disability is. And then there's a distinct lack of what the barriers for disabled people are. So when you ask people what they think the barriers are, quite rightly, they say, oh, the physical barriers, which is true. But then, you know, you have to pile on top of that the attitudinal barriers, the structural barriers, the external environment, the barriers that the external environment bring. So if we're thinking about kind of in a business sense, somebody coming for an interview, if I was going for an interview in some place in central London in an old building that I didn't know about, I might not know, for example, there wasn't a lift or the lift is broken. And I might be 10 minutes late. And if my interviewer doesn't understand or doesn't empathize with the fact that actually these barriers were in the way to stop me from being able to access the interview, then I'm just a candidate that's late and doesn't care. I mean, those are very basic, simple examples, but they're all over the place. I was talking to a colleague just before actually I spoke to you, and we were talking about the spoon theory. The theory that we've all got a limited amount of spoons every day that we use up. And so everything that takes a bit of energy, say we have 10 spoons a day and we can't top them up, and then they start from fresh the next day. So every time we assert a bit of energy, we're using a spoon. And for some people, that might be, let's say, for a physical process of getting dressed. For some people, that might be like a third of a spoon, or might not even be a spoon at all. For a physically disabled person or somebody with a mental health disability, it might be as much as 6 spoons. And then, leave the front door, and you're challenged by people's perceptions of you and their attitudes towards you, whether you have a physical impairment that people can see but don't get out of the way for, or a hidden impairment that people don't understand why you need support, and just treat you differently for that reason. You might have used up another 4 spoons on that. So by the time you've reached your first piece of public transport, you've used up all your spoons already. So I think, I don't know if I've somewhat strayed off your question, I think I have a bit, but society as a whole, I think we need to assert empathy when we're thinking about other people's experiences. And I think that's the only way we're going to move forward as a society, to embrace disability, to embrace diversity, because it's not about knowing all the answers, but it's about understanding that everybody has different experiences. They've come from a different place that morning that may mean that they need a bit of extra support, whatever that support might be.
And where do you think we are in terms of employers now? And what do you think the sort of employment situation is for disabled people now?
Well, I think it's improving, but I read an article from Even Break. They created a white paper, and the results of that are still quite astonishing, around, again, the attitudes of employers, but also the attitudes and the lack of confidence of disabled people. And that lack of confidence comes, it's not that a disabled person has just woken up and say, I'm not confident. That confidence has come from experience of being knocked down and using those spoons again. So when, that lack of confidence means that person's not going to be able to showcase their skills, not going to be able to ask the questions that they need to ask to get what they need. And if the employer doesn't understand that, then everybody's at an impasse. So, I mean, I could talk a lot about the physical barriers to the workplace, to the recruitment process for disabled people, but there's lots of information on that on my website and on other people's sites and everything. But I think, again, it's to do with understanding where that person's come from, those experiences that brought them here physically that morning today, but also brought them to how they're feeling about the situation as a whole, and the support that they get outside. If we go back to what I was saying about being in special schools, where the focus was not on education and getting disabled children to a level where they actually could go to university and they actually could hold down a job, but making sure that they were surviving. So, I mean, a lot of disabled people have been through the same journey. So if you go through that journey and you're popped out the other end and told to get a job, then you don't have that experience.
That's right.
And if you go to that mainstream school and you're bullied and you're segregated in that department and you're excluded from everything, you're not going to have that confidence to then say, actually, I deserve this. So from the employer's point of view, again, I'm kind of answering your question, sorry. From the employer's point of view, I think a lot more has to be done on their part. And it's not about policies, it's about awareness and empathy to a situation. And when you have the two of them, then you can come up with the solutions, but you need that awareness and empathy first.
Yeah.
So I think they're coming a long way and they have the right attitude, but
Yeah.
I think there's a lot further for employers to come.
And it's ultimately it's all about recognizing people for being people rather than their label.
Absolutely, yes, and that's all it is. That's all it is. And for some reason, we all have tinted glasses that stop us from seeing an individual for who they are.
We all like to be just put in that one box, and that's it. That's you're that person, and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're certainly you're doing amazing work with what you do, and in terms of the people that you work with, which organisations do you work with now? What type of places do you work?
So I'd say every sector, well, not every sector, but a lot of different sectors I've worked with, and ranging from charity, not-for-profit organisations to businesses.
Yeah.
So a couple of examples recently has been Heathrow Airport. As kind of a big international corporation, and a smaller organisation, or a not-for-profit, Surrey Police, which is still quite a big organisation. So there's a small not-for-profit charity called Global Giving, which I've done some work for as well. Yeah. So it's a range, because I think people are beginning to recognise that disabled people are everywhere, and there is a willingness and a want to understand and be as inclusive as possible, but I still think there's kind of like an awareness deficit in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, well, I think you're doing absolutely amazing work, and thank you so much for joining me for this chat on Cool People.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. Well, what is I'll put a link to your website at the end of this video, so if anybody needs to get in touch with you, then they can do. And thanks very much for watching this. And if you'd like to know anything about the sort of work that I do, please have a look at my website, which is cool2btrans.co.uk. And I hope to catch up with you on the next episode of Cool People.